Former Australian of the Year, Grace Tame, is at the centre of a political and public backlash tonight after leading controversial chants at a pro-Palestinian rally in Sydney. Yeah, that was Tame speaking from the steps of Sydney Town Hall during protests against the visit of Israeli President Isaac Herzog. Now, Tame led the chant from Gadigal to Gaza, globalise the Intifada. Intifada means shaking off in Arabic and is often used as an expression of solidarity with Palestinian resistance against Israel. But it's a phrase critics say carries violent and anti-Semitic connotations. So much so that New South Wales Premier Chris Minns has sought to ban the phrase under his state's revised hate speech laws, deeming it violent rhetoric. That chant has led to calls for Grace Tame to have her Australian of the Year honour revoked. Now, on Sky News Australia, Chris Kenny ran a montage of grabs from politicians backing those calls.
Is that the sort of thing that should see her stripped of that honour?
Yes, 100%.
Australia Day Council, in my view, should be taking a very dim view of this. Now, there is history, there is precedent.
Yeah, really, if you want intifada in Australia, just hand back your gong. It's the decent thing to do.
But Tame, well, she's hitting back and hard. In a social media post overnight, she said she was not the story, accusing politicians and the media of deflecting attention away from Israel's actions in Gaza and alleging protesters were met with unprovoked police brutality. The New South Wales Premier and Police Commissioner are disputing that. But these are the scenes from Sunday night that Grace Tame is talking about.
Sydney Town Hall, peak hour. It's volatile and violent.
They pepper sprayed me.
Hands up, not resisting, this man is grabbed by his shirt, punched repeatedly in the ribs by police and pulled to the ground. Another man tackled on tram tracks, arms restrained, his head slammed into the concrete, more punches thrown. As he allegedly fights back, biting an officer's finger. He was one of 27 people arrested last night when protesters clashed with police in the middle of the CBD.
Certainly looks rough, but there is evidence to suggest that in at least one of those videos, the protester was biting police. That's an allegation that, if you watch the tape, certainly seems borne out. When you go earlier in the footage, you can see the scuffle between officers and the protester escalating, and to me it does look like the officer is being bitten, but that will obviously be borne out in a court of law. But let's go back to Grace Tame. Should her Australian of the Year honour be revoked? Well, the simple answer is no. We live in a democracy. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. She hasn't broken any laws, or at least not yet. Maybe Chris Minns' hate speech laws will change and she will have broken a law. But at this point, she hasn't. We can't just strip Australian of the Year or other honours away from people just because we don't like their political views. Now, there is a precedent to have honour stripped, but so far it's only been people who have had the Order of Australia and other honours. They have been revoked because of criminal proceedings, not the Australian of the Year. But why are politicians and commentators on the right trying to cancel people? Again, we are a democracy. People have the right to have their say. Do I agree with a lot of what Grace Tame says? No, I don't. But I'll defend her right to say it. At least Chris Kenny on Sky called for Tame to hand it back in. He didn't demand she be stripped of the title, but others, like Barnaby Joyce, did just that. Now, what's interesting, I thought cancel culture was something we accused the hard left of doing. Jon Stewart, who hosts the very left-leaning show, The Daily Show, well, he's caught on to this, and he pointed that out this week when, in regards to American politics and the uproar about Bad Bunny performing at the Super Bowl.
When did the right become such f***ing pussies? When? Remember 2017 Remember what you hated about liberals? Oh, perpetually offended, safe spaces, censoring free speech, culture of victimhood. Remind you of anyone?
But it's not just the left-leaning Jon Stewart making this observation. Piers Morgan, who describes himself as a centrist, had this to say this week.
And in light of the furious reaction to Bad Bunny's spectacular and largely non-political halftime show at this year's Super Bowl, it's worth asking whether the culture is now shifting. Is MAGA becoming a bit thin-skinned, a bit sneering, a bit censorious, a bit, dare I suggest it, woke?
Hell of a turnaround, isn't it? So, you absolutely have the right to criticise Grace Tame. She's a public figure. She makes big statements. You can argue her point of view. But let's get rid of the crap of trying to take back her Australian of the Year. She was the Australian of the Year. She got that because of her advocacy for victims of sexual abuse. She has done a lot of good in the community. Again, I do not agree with everything Grace Tame says. I do not like the way she acted in front of Scott Morrison. She showed the office of the Prime Minister absolutely no respect. But she has the right to do it. I don't think it means she should be stripped of that title. I mean, I don't think she lives up to being Australian of the Year as well as she could, but that's her choice. It doesn't mean you can take it away.
The best place to watch McKnight Tonight is on YouTube. Help us monetize the show by going to youtube.com/@McKnight Tonight. And you can always become a paid member. That gives you exclusive live streams and early access to videos. Just go to youtube.com/@McKnight Tonight.